Portal combat continues, and South Carolina continues to climb higher and higher in the rankings, signing 4 players since Sunday, losing 1 on Monday. But the stock continues to soar for this program and what Beamer is doing in the portal. We talk about all of it next. Locked On Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler, and I hope all of you are having a fantastic Monday, as I always say, if that's even possible. Welcome in to Locked On Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Sports Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network in the country. Thanks to you guys. We got a good show for you today, and it's brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is the best place to get in on the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every single game day. All right, so here is what we're talking about today. It is going to be very, very, very portal heavy, and we'll talk about the latest since we last spoke. Now, we last spoke on Saturday. Sunday, had a little family day, just hung out with the fam, decided not to do a show, figured we'd come back and better than ever on this Monday morning. And in that meantime, you had 4 players commit. It's some really, really good players in some positions of need, and South Carolina continues to hit the portal and hit it hard and has done a very, very good job climbing way up in the rankings. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about one of the players lost today, what it looks like for the position unit at the offensive line and defensive lines moving forward. And then last but not least, we're going to close with, I'm going to give you a what if that I think we're not talking enough about, especially after Chaz Coleman decided to go to Tennessee. But let's get started in the latest in the portal, and we'll start with what South Carolina has done. Now, at the time of recording this has been the most frustrating part of the portal for me. As somebody covering the SEC, but especially South Carolina, it just doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. So today, you had a day where you saw 114 total players enter the portal. You had, I believe, 194 that signed at different places. So for like the 5th straight day, you had more players sign and commit than actually enter the portal. But you also had some slow days over the past couple of days, over the weekend especially, that saw not that many players enter until Monday, the floodgates reopened, and you started to see this final push because the portal closed on Friday. I think what we're going to see is players that know some programs are desperate, players that think they can go get paid at certain places, and they are going to enter late because they know somebody is going to overpay for them, or they have more leverage and can get a higher payday. It was a crazy, crazy weekend in general. Let me just tell you about where the portal stands as a whole. As of today, I believe it's over 2,900 total players. I want to say I think it's 2,988 players have entered the portal at the FBS level. Over 4,000 total players have entered overall, but at the FBS level, right under 3,000, and that is a lot, right? That is clearly a lot. In comparison to previous years, it's pretty much right up there with it. It's not anything that's more or less. You had 1,000 more players enter the portal on day 1, and we saw that number continue to climb throughout the week. But yeah, you are over 2,900 players that have entered the portal. 1,449 have committed. So you're right at 50% of total players that have committed. That means 50% of the players in the portal have not found a home yet. And if that's concerning, it should be, because we talk about all the time, the grass isn't always greener, right? And when you have 50%, and it's becoming more and more of a problem because of the way that the portal is run, and also because of the leech mentality that you have from some of these agents that don't really know what they're doing, especially it's their first time being agents, and they're doing it in this infant stage of the NIL and portal era. But in comparison to last year versus this year, last year you had around 68% of players who entered the portal found a home, went to a new place. That's it. That means 32%, almost a third of everyone that entered, never got out of it. Like an actual portal. They just never got out. This year, that number is at 50% with about 4 days left before it closes. Where South Carolina stands is very, very strong and very, very impressive. Currently on 247 Sports, they have the 18th ranked class in the country. Now, the SEC, they're not, I don't think they're even top 10 in the SEC. They might be right at 10. They have had a very, very strong portal class for a lot of SEC schools. And I believe you have 5 teams in the top 10, including all 5 of them being, I think, in the top 7. LSU is 1, Texas is 2. And then you have Kentucky, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, blah, blah, blah. But for South Carolina, what they have done this year has been more impressive than I think in the previous years for a number of reasons. 17 commits is right around what you had last year. I believe last year you had 18. Last year, of the 18 players you had committed, 10 were from Power 4 schools. This year, if you look at it right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 of the 17 are Power 4 players that are going from Power 4 to Power 4. Also, a lot of big schools. You know about Ohio State, Oklahoma, Alabama. And that's where we'll start today's episode, because you had 4 total players commit on Sunday. And those 4 players were, I told you this the other day, one that I'm not going to pronounce, from Illinois, Tamiwa Durajaye. We did a whole show, or a segment on him last time. But the other ones, Kelby Collins came in. His brother Drew Collins from Arkansas State. Kelby is from Alabama. Kelby is originally a 4-star recruit that went to Florida. So this will be his 3rd SEC school. A guy with a ton of experience and goes to a position of need, which is fantastic. And then the latest was from today, Jabri Coleman, a running back from Penn State, comes along with the new Penn State, running backs coach that came from Penn State as well. They have continued to get big name after big name, and then also like a prospects from big school after big school. That might not be huge news, right? Like there's a reason why players are transferring out. They don't have enough playing time. They want more playing time. They want a bigger bag, like any of those things. But at the very least, you have improved from last year to this year at the quality of players you have brought in, and the players that you're bringing in playing with more experience and at a higher level. And they're also former higher ranked recruits out of high school for the most part. Last year, you were able to bring in, GBD that came in from A&M, Gabriel Brunlow Downey he was a former 5-star, number 12 ranked player in the country. Well, this year, you haven't brought in any 5-stars or former 5-stars. You haven't lost anyone of huge substance. And you also haven't lost anyone to a direct competitor, which is something that no one seems to talk about that's happening everywhere else. I mean, it has been chaos everywhere else. South Carolina, Vandrevius Jacobson is going to Miami, right? Brian Rowan's going to UCLA. You don't directly compete with any of those teams. Like you look at the players that you lost. Jaylen Brown, obviously, he ends up going to LSU, but he wasn't a huge factor for you this year anyway. You lost another guy to Nebraska with Big Tree. Louisville, A&M, we got Trayvon Baugh, App State, Kansas, Western Michigan, Baylor, Michigan State, Syracuse. None of these players directly hurt you immediately. And that is also something I think that it's not something that's going to make or break a class or say like, oh my God, this is huge news. Thank God this happened. But it's just another feather in the cap for Shane Beamer and the staff because of the players that have left. I mean, like you think of the swift decisions that Beamer has been able to make. At the time when they had 14 commits, I'll have to do the math again now. 14 of the commits came on 24 visits. They got 24 kids to visit campus, and they got a commitment out of 14 of them. Like, that's a very good clip that you're not letting people leave Columbia, South Carolina without a commitment and without selling them on your vision and wanting to play here. And in this day and age, that's a really tough thing to do. You look at what happened yesterday. Cam Coleman goes to visit Alabama, commits to Texas. Their running back, I think, committed from NC State, a guy that we briefly talked about here, Hollywood Smothers. He was the number 2 running back in the class. He committed to Bama 2 days ago, commits to Texas 2 days later. DJ Lagway commits to Baylor, visits Ole Miss 2 days later. This is happening all over the place. It hasn't happened here. And that is a really, really good deal. And it also, in one of the very few cases where you got someone on campus and then they kept shopping around, Nitro Tuggle, the grass wasn't greener, and he made a commitment to come to South Carolina, even though it wasn't his last place he visited or the only place he visited. Again, a phenomenal job from this staff. Now, when we come back, we're going to talk more of the ins and outs of the specifics of who they brought in and also the offensive line specifically because of losing one more player. Jatavius Shivers ends up entering the portal on Monday afternoon. That is now your 8th scholarship offensive lineman that has left. But the guys you're bringing in continue to get rave reviews from everyone around the country that has been covering the sport and covering the portal specifically. We'll talk about that. Plus, the one take that I think we're not talking enough about, it may be too early to make it, but after seeing this past weekend, I don't think it is. Locked On Gamecocks continues right after this. All right, welcome back into the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. Before we continue, want to give a shout out to our friends over there at FanDuel. You guys hear me talk about them a bunch, and there's a good reason I do. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is giving all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs. Right now, every single college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. Here's what I love most about it. Whether you want to do player props, you want to do the over-under, you want a live bet, all of it is there for you in the app, but you also get the profit boost the minute you show up and open the app. If you already feel good about a bet, I felt really good about Ole Miss plus 4.5 last week. Felt really good about Indiana money line. Probably could have taken them to cover the spread or an alternate spread as well, but all of that is available for you at FanDuel. And I tell you what, you want to ride with the favorite when you think a team controls a matchup or build a parlay around the players and moments you think decide the game. You can do all that at FanDuel. And when you apply the profit boost and go after even bigger winnings, when you win, FanDuel pays you out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football. FanDuel is the best place to get on the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every single game day. Let's get back into it, and let's get in some conversation about the portal and what has been lost and gained and everything in between. Now, again, we have talked a lot about the offensive line. It's not a position that I've lost any sleep over any of the guys that you have not been able to retain. I think that's fine. Speaking of, very briefly, I've reached out to our buddy Clark Brooks, who works over on 3 SEC StatCat. We had him on before the season started. He is actually the sole person in charge of ranking all the players that are in the portal for On 3. Like, he does a tremendous job. I don't know how he does that. But I've reached out to him. We're going to have him on the show hopefully the next week or so when he has some downtime. But one of the things I asked him too was, what would some of these players from South Carolina specifically that they were able to retain, where would they have been ranked, and what would their NIL evaluation be if they went elsewhere? Because I think that's a fascinating thing to look at as well. Now, the guys you were able to bring in over the weekend. Let's start here with a former offensive tackle, Seth Smith. I believe it's from Northern Arizona, which is an FCS school. But here's the thing: even though he was from an FCS school, he was still a top 30 ranked offensive tackle in the portal from at least one service. Now, On 3 has him at number 62 and ranked 829th in the country, but a 6'6", 285-pound kid from Chandler, Arizona. Listen, you need bodies there, and I think one thing they've quietly been able to do is build depth on the offensive line, because now it's like a week ago we did this show on Monday where there's one player committed, and you sat here and thought, oh my God, they have so much work still to do. Well, there's still some players they're going to take. I think they're still trying to get 2 tight ends. Hopefully the kid from Florida State is one of those tight ends. I think he is really good, Pittman Jr. But they're still working on that, and I believe they still want to take at least one defensive back. Offensive line, with everything you lost, they have not only replenished the talent, but they've done so with some really, really good pieces and some really, really good added depth. I think one of the things we didn't talk enough about this year with that offensive line was, yes, they were bad, but they were also really injured. And I think I said this once before. It would be one thing if you were just bad. It's even worse when you're bad and injured, because now your bad players that you're having to replace are being replaced by worse players, and it's just not a winning recipe, especially in this conference. I think they've added so many quality depth pieces. And then you also look at just from, like, if you want to get hung up on the stars and star rankings and stuff like that, you can now look at what you've built potentially off the left side of this offensive line, and think about like Jacarius Pete coming in and what you've built there. Gray coming in, a 5-star player that could potentially play right away. But you also have replenished this offensive line with a lot of talent. You want to just the tackle, right? Shed Surratt is still coming back. That's something we haven't talked a ton about. Zion Giles, another guy that people are still really high on. Then you talk about guard. The Poku kid, who was listed as a tackle from East Carolina, but is also going to be able to play guard, started every game at right guard for East Carolina this year. Then Darius Gray, Hank Purvis, the kid you got from Purdue, and then still have Marquis Anderson coming back as well. And then you look at center. Ryan Brubaker coming back from an injury, Nolan Hay, who played last year for you, and then Carter Miller. You have replaced a lot of the talent lost to where, if Jatavius Shivers ends up leaving and is going to seek playing time elsewhere, it doesn't really feel like you have lost. It just, I'm trying to say this as nice as possible to not be a jerk. You've won the transactional piece. You've won. You have brought in more talent than you've lost. Now, Big Tree, at 6'5", 340, that went to Nebraska. That's a top 300 player and the number 21 ranked tackle in this portal. He is going to get paid at Nebraska and will probably step in right away to play. That's great. That's really the only piece from that offensive line that you've lost that you feel like, oh man, Josiah Thompson, he is going to go make money at Miami. And maybe he just, the light bulb comes on under Mario Cristobal, who's a phenomenal offensive line coach, and he all of a sudden is great. Maybe that happens. I don't see that happening. And I told you this the other day, when you talk about the two offensive linemen that you brought in with Peak and then also Poku, those two players combined, I know that Poku these numbers were at guard this past year. You have less sacks allowed, I think 10 total in 6 years combined of FBS and Power 4 football than Josiah Thompson gave up in 2. So the transactional like winner here, it's very clearly won by the players you have brought in. Now, the other players you brought in this past weekend, Jabri Coleman, I mean, the number 41 ranked running back, 6 feet, 210, kind of fits that mold of what you're trying to bring in. Also a guy that you're familiar with. Listen, out of high school, a guy that was a pretty decent recruit, was a 3-star, but had offers from all over the country. Georgia had offered him, North Carolina, Auburn, places like that. Auburn was once again trying to get him in this year, in the portal this past year. The two that I'm really excited for, Kelby Collins and Drew Collins, two brothers, where Kelby Collins he was a top 10 player in the state of Alabama out of high school, went to Florida, then transferred to Alabama last year and played there. Then Drew Collins from Arkansas State. Listen, two guys, one can play off the edge. Collins can kind of be inside or outside. You've now found some pieces here. I think Collins is a top 500 player in the portal. You've now found some pieces here, though, that can be effective at the defensive line position and also have added instant depth. And that is something we did not have this year. Just like point blank period. Going into Troy Pikes, I'm glad he's coming back. I'm really glad GBD is coming back. I think you've got some really good pieces there. Hopefully some other guys that can compete and add more value, add in depth at that position. But man, just everything that you lost from 2024 to 2025, it was a fool's errand to think that we were just going to replace that right away. Just a fool's errand to think we were going to replace that right away. But again, you start looking at this class as a whole. You brought in a kicker, which was a pretty big liability for you over the last 2 seasons. 2 different guys, but still just each year felt like a pretty big liability. I thought Mason Love was great, but you talk about the special teams aspect of this last year where Beamer brought it up at media days. You have a new face and new name at every single possible position in special teams. Kick returner, punt returner, long snapper, holder, kicker, punter, like everything, just everything. And that is not going to be the case this year. You bring in that kid Belafonte from Upton Belafont, which is just it sounds like the nicest restaurant I could ever go to. Like the nicest restaurant I couldn't afford, Upton Bellafont. A phenomenal name. Also, kind of sounds like a name off the show Bridgerton. Love that. Sure, the fiance would love it too. From Murfreesboro, Tennessee, as a former Murfreesboro, Tennessee resident and MTSU Blue Raider, love that. But here's the other thing too: unbelievably consistent. Unbelievably consistent. It may not be the best kicker in the country. I don't know. I think he's only attempted 2 field goals at 50+ yards, which is nothing crazy. But from a consistency standpoint, never missed between 20 and 29. I think he was 7-8 career-wise from 30 to 39, and he's only missed 2 kicks from 40+. Only missed 2 PATs, which kind of feels like too many, but whatever. You're going to be more consistent there. I guess maybe the best way to put it is going into this season, even with all the players you lost in the portal, which is now up to 22, and the new players coming in and all the freshmen that are going to probably have significant playing time, the amount of question marks you have going into 2026 it feels significantly less than what you had in 2025. And that includes a coaching staff that has 4 new faces on it. That is not something we have seen under Beamer. But don't you feel, I know I do, don't you feel way more confident and like there's way less question marks, even with the new coaches that are coming in? And I don't say lack of continuity, because that's not the best way to phrase it. But like don't you just feel better and a little bit more like there's just not as many, there's more answers to the questions that you have, and there's less questions than we had a year ago. The staff continues to win. The staff continues to win. And at every turn you think it's like, oh man, like a week ago we did the show. There was one player committed. On Wednesday, I put out that tweet. I don't know why people got mad about it, because it was just a factual statement. But the tweet said, listen, there were 2 teams that in the SEC that did not sign a single player on Wednesday of last week, and that was Ole Miss and South Carolina. One of those teams was preparing to play in the college football playoff semifinal with a chance to go to the national title. The other was South Carolina. Since that tweet, they've got 16 players they've committed, and they're not making the same mistakes you're seeing from other schools. Like Bama let a running back, Hollywood Smothers, phenomenal name. They let Hollywood Smothers leave campus without a signature on any paper and then go to Texas and get outbid. That's not happening at South Carolina. They're not making these stupid mistakes. They have been so calculated and precise with the decisions they've made. Sure, I wish they got Chaz Coleman. I really wish they got Chaz Coleman. But at the same time, I think they've gotten so much better, and not just better, but they've gotten so much deeper at positions of need. And now it's like, man, I've got some bold takes I think I'm going to have this offseason. Not that they're going to go win a national title or go undefeated or anything crazy like that, but like I think you've quietly gotten so good at certain positions. You got a new OC. You got one of the best and best quarterbacks, I think, from a potential standpoint in the country coming back. And they're going to be teaming up with what I think can be one of the deepest receiver rooms in the conference. Like, there's just so much untapped potential that I think you're going to see flourish this season, and so much more depth and players that we have not talked about, whether it be because it was a 4-8 year full of negativity and frustration, or because they were just freshmen or second-year guys that are waiting to start. I want you to think about this. Not every player is going to be this player, but think about how little we talked about Fred J.R. Johnson in 2024, and then in 2025, how big of a piece he was to this defense. He's back, which is great. The linebacker core, I think it's going to be one of the best in the SEC. I think it's going to look a lot like 2024. But think about this. What if some of those receivers, like maybe the tight end position, maybe defensive back, what if some of these positions in position units that like didn't really see a ton of. We didn't talk a lot about some of the names were on there because they just hadn't played yet. What if those players take that same step that Fred J.R. Johnson took from 2024 to 2025? What if we have multiple players on offense, especially, that take that kind of leap in year two? It doesn't feel like a far-fetched thing to say, because it wasn't like Johnson was like an all SEC linebacker. He was just one of the most solid and really good, fundamentally sound, really like accountable, dependable, great players that you had on the team last year, or above average, really good players on the team last year. Maybe great's a stretch. What if you get that from all of these other players, or at least a majority of them, which is what's supposed to happen? It almost feels like going into 2026, some of the things you had in your back pocket from 2024 and going into 2025 that weren't really on display yet could be massive, massive pieces going into next year. That is all for today's show. I'm starving. I'm going to get some dinner. I hope you guys had a fantastic Monday. We'll be back tomorrow with more, more portal talk. I'm sure it has been a whirlwind. It doesn't seem like it's slowing down anytime soon, even though it is, I think, slowing down a little bit for South Carolina. There should be a couple more names that are on this list of players that have visited that we should get some announcement from soon. Until next time, appreciate you guys, and go Cox.